She left without looking back. The Alpha King has searched every border for 3 years. The road into the Grayville Valley was not a road at all. It was a livestock track, half swallowed by late-autumn grass, winding between 2 shoulders of granite that rose on either side like the walls of something that had chosen to keep its secrets. My wolf had found it, not me. I had been staring at a map for 3 years at the network of border post records and traveling healers' registers and market day entries that my men had assembled, one slow thread at a time, and the map had given me nothing I could ride toward. It was my wolf, finally, who lifted his head in the gray morning and pulled. Not a direction I could name. A direction I could feel, low and insistent, behind the breastbone, like a coal that had been banked for 3 winters, and was finally, carefully, being uncovered. I rode alone. My captain Edric had argued against it. Edric argues against most things I do now. He has been watching me for 3 years, and he has the look of a man watching a building for signs of structural failure. I told him I would send word when I arrived. I did not tell him that I didn't know what I would find, or what I would do when I found it, or whether she would even consent to speak to me. These were not things I could say aloud to Edric. They were barely things I could say to myself. Her name is Saren. She left before dawn on the 14th day of the first winter I had known her, and she did not look back. I know she did not look back because I was standing in the doorway of the great hall of Calder Keep, watching her go, and I watched her all the way to the tree line across the gray courtyard, through the gate that someone had left unlatched, along the pale frost-stiff track that leads to the eastern pass, and she never turned her head. Not once. She walked the way she did everything, quietly, steadily, without announcement, as if she had made a decision some time ago and this was simply the carrying out of it. I could have called after her. I want to be honest about that, because I have spent 3 years being honest with myself about it in ways I was not honest when it might have mattered. I could have said her name. I could have walked across the courtyard. The frost would have crunched under my boots and she would have heard me and she would have stopped. I believe she would have stopped. And I could have told her what I understood, which was everything I had been too proud and too frightened and too much a king to understand while she was still in the warmth of the hall. I could have done all of that. I stood in the doorway, and I watched her until she was gone. That was 3 years ago. I have been writing since. I should tell you how she came to be there. She was not a member of my pack. She held no rank in the Ashvaran hierarchy, no bloodline record, no guild affiliation, no sponsor among the keep's established healers. She had come with the autumn supply carts as a traveling healer out of the Middle Valleys, carrying a kit of tools and a reputation that preceded her in the way that useful people's reputations travel, quietly, by word of mouth, in the form of specific debts. The head driver of the supply carts had a son who had been mauled by a mountain cat 3 seasons prior and who had kept his arm because of her. He had asked, with the plain directness of a man who knows who owes what to whom, whether she might ride the supply route that year. She had said yes. That was how she arrived, on a supply cart. Sitting in the back with the salt barrels, her healer's kit in her lap, watching the road as it climbed toward the keep with the expression of someone who finds mountains neither alarming nor particularly impressive. I did not notice her the day she arrived. I am ashamed to record that, but it is the truth. I was in the east yard when the carts came through, reviewing a dispute between 2 of my border captains that had dragged into its 3rd week, and I was focused on the dispute and on not showing how irritated I was about it, which requires most of my attention when I'm irritated. I heard the carts, registered them as the expected supply run, and returned to the captains. My wolf noticed her. I did not understand what had happened until later. At the time I was aware only of a sudden strange stillness, the inner noise of a long hard autumn, the captain's voices, the weight of the 100 decisions I carried, all of it going quiet for a moment the way a wind drops, not silent, still, as if something had been set down that I had not known I was carrying. I looked up. I saw the carts. I saw the salt barrels and the grain sacks and the bundled wool and a woman sitting in the back with a kid in her lap, watching the mountains with calm gray eyes. Then the captains reclaimed my attention, and the moment passed. But my wolf had already taken note. My wolf, who had been difficult for 2 solid years, pacing, restless, refusing to settle, making sleep a negotiation I sometimes lost, went quiet at that moment and did not start again. Not for 14 days. She had come to help with an outbreak of a lung sickness that had hit the northern barracks. It was serious but not lethal if treated early, and she treated it early, and with a competence that my chief physician, a learned man named Dorvest who does not distribute praise lightly, described to me as frankly better than we managed. She worked without asking for recognition. She ate with the barrack staff, slept in the infirmary anteroom, and when she was not treating the sick she was in the supply yard cataloging what medicines the keep stores were missing and what the surrounding valley markets could provide. She made a list. She left the list for Dorvest. She did not tell him it was from her. He found it on his workbench one morning and thought for 3 days that one of his junior healers had left it before he traced it back to her. I met her properly on the 5th day. Properly meaning, I sought her out, which I did not announce in those terms even to myself. I told Dorvest I wanted a report on the barrack's sickness. He told me she was the one to give it. I went to the infirmary. She was at the end cot, rebinding a young soldier's chest. She looked up when I entered, registered that I was the Alpha King, and did not change her expression or her pace. She finished the binding before she stood. "My lord," she said, not nervous, not deferential in the manner of someone performing deference, just respectful the way a person is respectful of a river, acknowledging its nature without being afraid of it. "Dorvest says you have a report for me," I said. "I can give you one," she said. "The acute cases are past the worst. Your barracks heating is inadequate for late autumn. The northern wing bleeds cold through the stone. That's why this spread so quickly. You should consider wooden lining on the interior walls before the first heavy freeze." She was talking to me the way my engineers talk to me. As if the information was what mattered and the fact of my rank was simply context. I found it disorienting. I found it, underneath the disorientation, deeply restful. "What's your name?" I asked. "Saren," she said, "just that. No family identifier, no pack affiliation offered." "Where are you from?" "The Middle Valleys, Corville originally. I travel." "You came on Brand's supply cart." "He offered. I needed to come north." "Why north?" She considered the question, not as if it was impertinent, but as if she was deciding how much of the answer was useful to give me. "There's a bark that grows above the snowline that I've been told is useful for the kind of lung sickness you've been seeing. I wanted to verify it." "And did you?" "Yes," she said, "it works. I've added it to the list I left for Dorvest." There was a pause. My wolf was still. The infirmary smelled of camphor and tallow and the cold stone breath of the keep, and she stood in the middle of it with the young soldier's used bandaging in her hands, looking at me with the mild attentiveness of someone waiting for the conversation to find its purpose. "You're welcome to remain through the winter," I heard myself say. "The pass closes after the first heavy snow. You'd need to wait for the spring thaw to travel regardless." It was true. It was also not the reason I said it. She looked at me for a moment, not calculating, considering. "All right," she said. "I'll need access to the still room and to whatever grows in the valley below the freeze line." "Done," I said. She nodded and went back to her work. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to, then left. Those 14 days. I want to try to describe them accurately, because they matter to this account and because I did not understand them correctly while they were happening, and the gap between what they were and what I allowed myself to understand is the whole reason I spent 3 years on the road. She was not a woman who sought attention. She did not maneuver for position or proximity. She worked the infirmary, the still room, the valley when the weather allowed. She ate communally, spoke when spoken to, and had a quality that I had not encountered before in anyone in my household. She was entirely unimpressed by rank, not as a performance of independence but simply as a fact. My title was a piece of information about me, like my height or my preference for cold rather than warm rooms. It told her how to address me. It did not tell her how to be around me. This meant that when we were in the same space, which happened more often as the days passed, though I would have denied engineering it, she was simply present. She did not recalibrate herself for my benefit. She did not watch for my reactions. She asked questions when she had them and was quiet when she didn't. And the questions were always about the valley or the medicines or the particular history of the lung sickness, never about me, which meant I found myself volunteering information about myself in the way you do when a person's lack of demand makes you want to offer. I told her things. Small things, mostly, the history of the keep, what the northern winters were like, a difficulty I was having with the border grain stores. She listened, not in the way of someone being polite about a subject that doesn't interest them, but in the way of someone who actually wants to understand the thing you're describing. She would ask a follow-up question that showed she had been tracking not just the words but the shape of the problem underneath them. Once, this was the 8th or 9th day, I had lost count. I was describing the grain store difficulty and she said, quietly, "The problem sounds like it's the accounting, not the storage." And she was right. It was the accounting. I had not been able to see it clearly until she named it. "How did you know that?" I asked. "My father managed a valley market for 20 years, she said. "He talked about it a great deal." "Is he still in Corvo?" A brief pause. "No," she said. "He died the winter before last." She said it simply, but I heard what was in the simplicity, the weight that a person carries when they have had time to make peace with something but not to stop feeling it. I recognized it because I carry something similar, differently shaped. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked at me. "Thank you," she said, and I believed her. My wolf during all of this was entirely still, settled in a way I had not felt in years, not asleep, attentive, warm, present, the way he was when everything was well. I noticed it the way you notice the absence of a sound that has been with you so long you had stopped hearing it, by the quality of the silence that replaces it. I did not ask myself why. This is the thing I have to say clearly. I knew. Some part of me knew from the moment in the east yard when the wind dropped and everything went still. My wolf knew immediately, completely, without doubt. The mate bond recognizes itself before the mind is willing to. But I was a king who had ruled alone for 8 years, who had constructed his life around the disciplines of solitude, the wall between my own judgment and any particular attachment. Because a king who can be moved by a person can be moved through a person, and I had believed for 8 years that this was wisdom. I believed it was wisdom until the 14th day, when I came to the infirmary and she was not there, and Dorvas told me she had left before dawn with the supply cart driver's nephew, who was making a run to the valley market. She had left her kit. She had left the updated medicine list on Dorvas's workbench. She had not left a message for me. I went to the gate. The frost-stiff track led toward the eastern pass and it was empty. I stood in the doorway of the great hall for a long time. My wolf was not quiet anymore. He was making a sound I had no name for, low and sustained, not pain exactly, not grief exactly, but the specific desolation of a creature who has just understood what he has lost by staying still. I did not ride after her. I told myself it was dignity. I told myself it was the calculation of a king. That a woman who left without a word had made her position clear, that to ride after her was to make myself ridiculous, that she had been a passing healer and the winter was over and I would forget by spring. I did not forget by spring. I have not forgotten in 3 years, and dignity, I have learned, is a very cold companion. The first 6 months, I did not look for her. I want to be accurate. I did not formally look for her. I mentioned her to Edric in what I believed at the time was a casual way. Did he know if the healer from the supply cart had connections in any of the border settlements? Had anyone had cause to note where she was headed? Edric has worked for me for 12 years, and he is a careful man, which means he understood immediately that this was not casual. But he is also a loyal man, which means he answered the question without commenting on it. He didn't know. The cart driver's nephew had dropped her at the Valley Market Junction, and she had gone on foot toward the southern passes. After that, nothing. After 6 months, I stopped pretending it was casual and I asked Edric to find her properly. He put 3 men on it. The 3 men found traces, a healer's entry in a border post register, a purchase at a traveling medicine market, a name mentioned by a village elder in the foothills, but the traces never converged into a location. She moved. Not as if she was running, as if she had always lived this way, traveling the middle valleys and the high passes on a circuit that answered to nothing but the season and the need. The mate bond during this period was a continuous low-grade ache. This is the only way I know to describe it. Not sharp, not dramatic, present. Behind the breastbone always like a bruise that doesn't fade, and my wolf, who had been quiet for those 14 days, was not quiet anymore. He did not pace the way he had before I met her. He was stiller than that. Grief still. The way an animal is still when it has exhausted itself and found no remedy and has simply resolved to wait. I ran the kingdom. I held court. I settled disputes and reviewed grain stores and negotiated with the border lords and trained in the yard at dawn the way I always had. From the outside, my captains and my council saw a king who had perhaps grown quieter and more decisive in the same motion, which they interpreted as maturity. From the inside, I was a man who had learned what it costs to have everything you've built around solitude and then understand, one morning too late, that solitude is not peace. It is only the absence of what you have not yet found. In the second year, I told Edric to stop pretending this was administrative and to put as many men on it as were needed. He did. He also, to his credit, asked me no questions about it, only brought me what they found. What they found was, she had been in Mervith in the Southern Valley for the autumn. She had set up a temporary infirmary for a settlement dealing with a fever outbreak, used the upland bark technique, the same one she'd mentioned at Calder Keep. The settlement elder had sent a letter of thanks to the nearest border post, which was how we found the thread. By the time we traced it, she had moved on. She had been in the western foothills the following spring. A logging camp had a man with a badly set bone, broken the previous year, causing increasing pain. She had reset it, correctly. The camp foreman told my man that she had stayed 2 weeks and refused payment, taking only supplies for the road. She refused payment frequently. This was a pattern that emerged as we collected the threads. She treated what needed treating and took only enough to continue traveling. She was building nothing. She was accumulating nothing. She was simply going from place to place where she was needed, setting things right and moving on. I thought about this a great deal in the third year, riding between one false trail and the next. I thought about what kind of person builds their life that way, not from an absence of ambition, because she was not a person without ambition. The medicine list she left Dorvast was the work of someone who cared intensely about precision and effect, but from an excess of something else. Something that did not require to be seen. Something that was satisfied by the fact of the thing being done, not by the record of having done it. I thought about what I had said to her over 14 days and what I had not said. I thought about the evening in the 8th day when she had named the accounting problem and I had looked at her and understood something I did not put into words. I thought about why I had not put it into words, and the answer, when I let myself be honest about it, was this. I was afraid, not of her, of what the words would mean. Of what claiming a mate meant for a king who had organized his entire authority around the discipline of needing nothing. The word came back to me then, as it had kept coming back over 3 years. Mate, my wolf had known it on the first day. I had known it and refused the knowledge until the morning I stood in a doorway watching her walk away, and by then the knowing was indistinguishable from loss. In the 3rd year I stopped looking for her through records and registers. I started listening to my wolf instead. He had a direction. He had always had a direction. I had been ignoring it because it was not a direction I could plot on a map, and I am, at my core, a man who trusts maps. But 3 years of maps had given me only traces, and I was done with traces. I let my wolf lead. He led me north. The track into the Grayville Valley leveled out after the second granite shoulder, opening into a wide upland basin cupped by peaks. In summer it would be green. I could see the ghost of it in the straw-colored grass that still stood in the sheltered folds. There was a river running east, thin and quick over pale stones, and along its near bank a settlement. Not a village exactly, perhaps 15 structures, timber and stone, clustered with the practical intimacy of people who understand cold and who have learned to share walls against it. Smoke from 3 chimneys, a goat pen to the south. Someone had cleared a half-acre to grow something in the mountain season. The bed was turned and mulched for winter. My wolf was pulling so steadily, he felt like a current I was swimming in. I dismounted at the settlement edge and led my horse by the reins. A man came out of the nearest building, middle-aged, heavyset, with the unhurried wariness of someone who sees few strangers and has learned to take his time about them. "Looking for someone," he said. "A healer," I said. "Traveling woman, gray eyes. She would have come through in the last months." He looked at me for a long moment. "You a lord?" "Yes." "She know you're coming?" "No." He considered that. "She's in the treatment house," he said at last, and pointed toward the river. The treatment house was the furthest building from the settlement center, set slightly apart from the rest in the manner of a place that handles things others would rather keep at a distance. Illness, injury, the complicated business of the body asserting its needs. It was a single-room timber structure with a good roof and 2 windows facing the mountain. A bundle of drying plants hung from a peg beside the door, turning in the cold air. I stopped outside it for a moment. My wolf was entirely still. Not the stillness of the 14 days, that had been the warm, settling stillness of rightness, everything coming to rest. This was a different stillness, the held-breath stillness of something that has waited a very long time and is afraid to move, in case moving breaks it. I knocked. A pause, then footsteps and the door opened. 3 years is not long enough to dim the face of the person your wolf chose on the first day. I knew that, intellectually. I had not known, in the way you know things in your chest rather than your head, that it would feel exactly the same. The wind dropping, the inner noise going quiet, the particular sensation behind the breastbone of something that has been pressing without cease finally being released. She looked at me, the gray eyes, the expression that did not change for the fact of my rank, that registered my presence as a piece of information, and then this was new. This was something I had not seen in 14 days, because I had not given her cause to show it, drew back slightly. Not afraid. Something more complicated. The face of someone who has prepared for a possibility and is now discovering that preparation and the actual thing are not the same. "My lord," she said. "Calder," I said. "Please." "A beat, Calder," she said carefully, as if testing its weight. "May I come in?" She stepped back from the door. I entered. The inside of the treatment house smelled like her kit, camphor, dried bark, the clean mineral smell of infused water. There was a cot against the far wall, empty and neatly made, and a workbench along the south side with tools arranged in the order of a person who knows where everything is and prefers it to stay that way. A fire in a small iron brazier. 2 stools. The light through the east window was thin and white, the particular quality of mountain autumn light that makes everything look both clear and far away. She stood near the workbench and watched me. I stood near the door and let her. "How did you find me?" she asked. "My name isn't in any of the border registers near here." "No," I said. "The registers stopped helping about 6 months in." She looked at me steadily. "You've been looking for 6 months." "3 years," I said. The stillness in the room was of a different quality for a moment. She absorbed that. I watched her absorb it, the slight change in her breathing, the way her hands settled against the workbench edge. 3 years, she repeated. "Yes." "Why?" she asked. And then before I could answer, she said, "No, I know why. I could feel it, the pull, for 3 years. I kept moving because I didn't know what you would say when you found me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stand still long enough to find out." The honesty of it struck me the way her honesty always had, without cushioning, without performance, simply the truth as she understood it offered to another person as a courtesy. I had been married to evasion for so long that I had forgotten what this felt like a window being opened in a closed room. "What changed?" I asked. "You stopped moving." "This valley needed a healer," she said. "They'd been without one for 2 years. I couldn't leave." A pause. "And I was tired," she said more quietly, "of moving." I took a breath. "I need to say something to you," I said, "and I need to say it correctly. I've had 3 years to practice, but I want you to know I'm still not certain I'll manage it." The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. "All right," she said. "I knew," I said. "When you were at the keep, I knew what you were to me, and I didn't say so, and you left because I gave you no reason to stay. That is the truth of it, and I won't dress it as something better than it was. I was afraid of what it would mean. I am a king who has spent 8 years building his authority on the certainty of needing nothing. And you were a woman who was about to make that certainty impossible. And I stood in a doorway and watched you walk away, because I thought the walls I'd built were worth more than what I was letting go." She was watching me without expression, listening, giving me the same quality of attention she gave everything, complete, without judgment in it, which was more frightening than judgment would have been. "I was wrong," I said, "not in the way of a miscalculation, in the way of a man who refused to understand something that was being offered to him and spent 3 years with the weight of that refusal on him every day. My wolf has been grieving since the morning you left. I have been grieving since the morning you left. And everything I've built, the kingdom, the authority, the discipline, has been exactly what it always was, which is a structure around an absence. You were not an absence when you were there. You were the only thing in 14 days that was not an absence." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the east window, the mountain light shifted, a cloud moving across the pale sun, and the room dimmed slightly and then brightened. "That's a great deal to say," she said at last, after 3 years of silence. "Yes," I said, "I know." "You said nothing. You stood in the doorway and said nothing." "Yes." "I looked for something from you," she said. She said it without accusation, but with the precision of someone who is being accurate rather than kind. "I was at the gate. I knew you were there. I walked slowly. I thought—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter what I thought." "It matters to me," I said. "What did you think?" She looked at the workbench for a moment. When she looked back at me, her expression had changed, not softer exactly, but less armored, the way a face looks when it has decided to tell the truth, even though the truth is not painless. "I thought you might call after me," she said. "I thought, perhaps he'll say something. And when you didn't, I thought I had imagined everything, that the pull I felt was mine alone, that I had made a story out of a kind man who had offered me warmth through a winter, and that the story was not real." "It was real," I said. "None of it was imagined. The pull you felt was not one-sided." "Then why?" "Because I was a coward," I said, "not in the way of a man who fears pain. In the way of a man who fears what love will ask of him, which is to be seen without the armor on, and I had been wearing the armor for so long I had forgotten it was armor." I paused. "I have had 3 years to learn that I was wrong about that too, The armor is not protection. It is only a way of being alone that feels like strength. The silence in the room was different now. Not the held-breath stillness of before, something more open in it. I was aware of my wolf, very still, very attentive, the way he had been in the best of those 14 days, the warm, settled attentiveness of a creature who is exactly where he needs to be. "What do you want from me now?" she asked. "What does 3 years of searching mean you're asking?" "I'm asking you to let me try to be worth the ask," I said. "I'm not here to bring you back as a king's claim. I'm here because I can't be the version of myself I want to be without you, and I know that's a great deal to put on a woman who left me before dawn with good reason, and I know I have no right to expect it. I'm asking. That's all. I'm asking." She looked at me for a long moment, then she said, "Sit down." I sat on the stool nearest the door. She remained by the workbench. "The people in this valley," she said, "they have fever coming. There's a strain of it in the lower passes and it moves north with the cold. I've been preparing for it. I can't leave in the next 3 months." "I'm not asking you to leave," I said. "I can stay." She looked at me. "You're the Alpha King." "I'm also a man who has been riding for 3 years and has nowhere he needs to be more urgently than here," I said. "My council will survive. They have survived. I have a capable steward and a captain who has been managing my distractions for a considerable time and is very good at it." Something in her expression shifted, the not-quite smile again, fuller this time. "You would stay in this valley," she said, "in a treatment house. There are worse places. There's one cot. I'll sleep by the fire." She looked at me for another long moment. Then she walked to the second stool and sat on it, and we were facing each other across the small room with the fire in the brazier and the mountain light in the east window, and I could feel the bond, not the ache of 3 years, not the bruised constant pressure of it, but something else now, something that had to do with proximity and truth told and the walls coming down on both sides. It felt like warmth. It felt like the way a room feels when the cold has been shut out, and the fire has been burning long enough to reach the stones. "You would have to earn it," she said. "Not the title. I have no use for a king. I have considerable use for a person who tells the truth and does not disappear into his armor when the truth gets difficult." "I know," I said. "That's what I'm offering." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There's a morning task here. The basin settlement, there's an elder with a knee that needs drainage every other day. I've been doing it. I could use another pair of hands." I looked at her. "I don't know how to drain a knee." "I'll show you," she said. I stayed through the winter. I want to set down what that was, not in the way of recording a king's acts, but in the way of trying to be honest about what it meant to be a person in a small room in a mountain valley, learning what he'd spent 8 years refusing to learn. I drained the elder's knee. Badly at first, then less badly, then adequately. She corrected me without comment, just a repositioning of my hand, a small instruction about angle, and I noticed that I did not feel diminished by this, which was new. I had been diminished in my own accounting by any evidence of my own limits, because a king who is seen to be learning implies a king who did not already know, and I had built my authority on the performance of already knowing. In the treatment house, watching her work, I understood that this was exactly backward. The authority she carried, the quality that made the Basin Settlement's heavyset warden trust her with the most vulnerable of his people, came not from the appearance of certainty, but from the genuine precision of her knowing. From the years of careful learning that she wore so lightly, it looked like instinct. I learned from her. This sounds simple. It was not simple. It required the dismantling of something I had spent 8 years building, and dismantling goes slowly, and there were days when the armor came back up without my intending it, and she would wait, without comment, until I could set it down again. She was patient in the way of a person who understands that patience is not passivity. It is the active choice to stay present while something works itself out. We talked in the evenings. Long conversations, the fire low and the mountain quiet outside, about her father and the valley market, about my father and the early years of the kingdom, about what we had each concluded from the experience of loss, which was not the same conclusion but was compatible in the way of two people who have thought carefully about the same hard thing and arrived at adjacent truths. She told me about the settlements she had been through in 3 years, the places she had helped, the ones where she had been too late, the child in the western foothills who had not made it despite everything she had, and how she had sat with that for a long time before she could continue. She told me these things with the same unpadded directness she told everything, and I understood that this was not coldness. It was the opposite of coldness. It was the willingness to let the grief be real rather than managing it into something smaller and safer. I told her about the doorway. I told her in more detail than I had on the first day, not because she needed more detail, but because I needed to say it all the way out, to not leave any of it inside where it had been turning for 3 years. She listened. She asked one question near the end. "Did you know it would feel like that, afterward?" "No," I said. "I thought I was making the disciplined choice." "What did you think it would feel like?" "I thought it would feel like nothing," I said. "I thought that was the point." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "That's very sad." She said it without pity and without accusation. She said it the way she would say that a man's bone was badly set, as a diagnosis, something that had been causing damage and needed to be named before it could be addressed. I felt the truth of it as a physical thing, like a stone finally put down. "Yes," I said, "it was." The mate bond during those weeks was not the ache I had carried for 3 years. It was something different, not pain, not even relief exactly, but the quality of a wound that is healing, which is not comfortable but is moving in the right direction. The warmth of it increased as the weeks passed. My wolf was still in the way he had been in the best days of the first 14, the settled, attentive stillness, but quieter even than that. The stillness of something that has been afraid for a long time and has finally set the fear down. The mate mark appeared on the 5th week, on my wrist, which is where such things settle in the Ashvaran tradition when they come to the surface of their own accord, not declared, not claimed, simply acknowledged by the bond as the bond finds its ground. It was not dramatic. I noticed it one morning while I was washing at the basin by the brazier, a pattern of fine lines, pale against the skin, that had not been there the night before. I looked at it for a moment. Then I showed her. She looked at my wrist, then she held up her own left wrist. The same pattern, faint but unmistakable, the mirror image. We were both quiet for a moment. "It's been there a week," she said. "I thought you should be the one to see yours first." I looked at her. "You waited." "I didn't want to push," she said, simply as if this were obvious. I understood then the specific quality of her patience, not the absence of feeling, not the management of it, but the absolute refusal to use feeling as pressure. She had been carrying the mark for a week and had said nothing, because she did not want the knowledge of it to become a weight on me. In the whole of my experience as a king, surrounded by people who used every advantage they had, every piece of information and every emotional lever, this was the most extraordinary thing I had ever encountered. "Saren," I said. She looked at me. "I would like, if you are willing, to claim you as my mate, formally, not in the sense of a ceremony or a kingdom's witnessing here, in this room, with only the fire and the mountain for witness. I would like to make the promise I should have made 3 years ago, in whatever form is real to you." She was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved across the valley and the grasses hissed softly. "You'd need to stay," she said. "Not always, but partly. This valley has a 2-year gap in care that I'm still filling. I can't walk away from it for a kingdom's calendar." "The kingdom can accommodate a healer's calendar," I said. "I've been running it from further away than Grayville for 3 years." "You'd need to let Edric know you found what you were looking for," she said, "before he sends the search parties." Edric, I said, has been waiting for this message for 3 years. He will not be surprised. She looked at me for a long moment. The gray eyes, the expression that had never changed for my rank and still didn't, which was the thing I loved most, had loved most. I understood now, from the moment in the east yard when the wind dropped and my wolf went still. Not love for a king, not awe or calculation or the particular performance of warmth that people direct at power. Just the thing itself, steady and particular, without any of the apparatus. "All right," she said. "Yes." I held out my hand. She put hers in it, the wrist with the mark against my wrist with the mark, and the warmth of it was like nothing I have language for, not the ache, not the bruised pressure, not even the healing warmth of the weeks before. Something that had been moving toward this for 3 years, arriving at it, completing its transit, settling into rest. My wolf made a sound, not grief, not even joy exactly. The sound a creature makes when the thing that was wrong has been set right and the waiting is over. Edric came in the 2nd month. He arrived with 4 men, and the expression of a captain who has been managing a kingdom's logistics for 3 years, while its king rode across its borders looking for a woman, and is permitted, now that the matter is resolved, to show the relief he has been keeping off his face for all that time. He stood in the doorway of the treatment house and looked at Saren. He looked at me. He looked at the wrist with the mark. "My lord," he said, in the tone of a man who is choosing his words with great care, "the council is well. The border grain situation has resolved. Your steward has handled the autumn audits and requests your review when convenient." "Thank you, Edric," I said. He looked at Saren again. "My lady," he said. She looked at him. "There's a settlement elder here with a knee that needs drainage. Calder has been assisting. If you're staying, I'll show you both." Edric's expression did not change, which is a tribute to his long years of service. He turned to me. "She's as I'd hoped," he said quietly. "More," I said. We left Grayville in the spring, when the valley's fever was past, and the settlement had 2 months of daylight ahead in her replacement. A young healer from the southern valleys whom she had been corresponding with arrived to take the work on. She handed over her records with the precision I had come to understand was her signature. Everything noted, every supply level logged, every patient's history set out clearly, because the work mattered more than the credit. The settlement elder, whose knee was considerably improved, walked to the valley edge to see us off. The heavy-set warden who had pointed me to the treatment house on the first day shook my hand and said, without particular ceremony, "Bring her back when she wants to come." I told him I would. She said she would come of her own accord, which was more accurate. She had not been to Calder Keep in 3 years and 2 months. She rode the last stretch of the eastern track in the late afternoon light, the mountains behind us and the valley below opening into the wide Ashburn basin, and she was quiet in the way she was always quiet, not absent, present in a fuller way than most people manage when they're talking. I rode beside her and did not need to fill the silence, which is a thing I had only learned to do since Grayville. At the gate I stopped. She stopped beside me. The great hall ahead, the courtyard, the frost-stiff track, all of it as it had been, the same stones and the same layout, but changed in the way that things change when you understand them differently than you did before. "The last time I stood at this gate," I said, "you were walking through it." She looked at it for a moment, then she looked at me. "I wasn't sure what I was walking toward," she said. "I had hoped you'd say something. When I didn't hear anything, I thought the walking was the only honest thing to do." "It was the honest thing," I said. "I was the one who was dishonest." She was quiet for a moment. "Then you found me." "My wolf found you," I said, "after 3 years of me being too proud to listen to him." "But you listened eventually," she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at the gate. Then she nudged her horse forward through it into the courtyard. I followed. The great hall was lit. Dorvast was there, older, thinner, still unwilling to distribute praise lightly. And when he saw her, he stopped in the middle of the room, and his face did something I had never seen it do before, which was to show what he was feeling before he had the chance to decide whether it was appropriate. "You left a medicine list," he said to her, "3 years ago." "I remember," she said. "Half of what's in it we implemented," he said. "The other half I would like to discuss." She looked at him with the expression I had come to understand as the look she wore when she was pleased but not inclined to make a production of it. "Tomorrow," she said. "We rode all day." He nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. He looked at me. "My lord," he said, in the tone of a man who has had 3 years of dealing with a distracted king and would like those years acknowledged, "I'm glad." "So am I, Dorvest," I said. "So am I." That night in the hall that had been half a room for 3 years, the shadow of her absence in every corner of it, she sat by the fire and I sat across from her, and the fire was the same fire, the stones the same stones, the cold at the windows the same cold. But the hall was full in a way it had not been since the morning she walked through the gate into the early dark, and the difference was not light or warmth or sound. It was the particular fullness of a space that is no longer carrying an absence. My wolf lay at the fire's edge, fully still, the sleep of something that has had everything set right. There are things I know now that I did not know before I lost her. I know that the discipline of needing nothing is not strength. It is only the refusal to name what you need, which leaves it to make its demands in other ways, less legible but not less pressing. I know that a woman who tells the truth without ornamentation is rarer than all the gold in the Ashvaran vault, and that the right response to truth told plainly is to tell the truth back, not later when it's safe, but then, in the moment, when it costs something. I know that my wolf was wiser than my pride on the first day and on every day after, and that the 12 years of my reign before she arrived were the reign of a king who was capable but incomplete, who had built something real but had built it around an absence he hadn't yet learned to name. I know that the morning she walked out of the gate, and I stood in the doorway, and said nothing is the worst morning of my life. Not because of what was lost, she came back. The bond holds. The mark is on both our wrists and has been since the 5th week in Grayville, but because of who I was in that moment, which was a man choosing the appearance of strength over the substance of what was real. I do not let myself forget that morning. It is not a comfortable thing to carry. But I think it is the right thing to carry, because the man who forgets the morning he stood in a doorway and said nothing is likely to find himself standing in a doorway again. She is in the still room now, updating the medicine inventory in the precise handwriting that Dorvest, I am told, has been attempting to convince his junior healers to replicate for 3 years with limited success. In an hour she will come to the hall for dinner, and she will sit across from me, and I will say something she will answer with the particular precision that has been answering something in me since the east yard, since the wind dropped, since my wolf went still, and I did not yet know what it meant. The alpha who stands before a mate knows. Recognition and the claiming are not the moment of power. They are the moment of putting power down, of standing at a gate and riding through it instead of standing in the doorway watching what you love walk away from you. I rode through the gate, 3 years late across every border in the Ashvaran reaches, on a livestock track through granite and autumn grass, but I rode through it. That is what I know. That is what I would have any man who calls himself powerful understand. The bond does not wait for you to be ready. It arrives when it arrives, and the question it asks is not whether you are strong enough to bear it. The question is whether you are honest enough to name it before the frost-stiff track is empty, and the only sound is the one your wolf makes when he understands what staying still has cost. I named it in the end. In a small room with a fire and a mountain morning, and a woman who had been waiting not for a king, but for the person underneath the king, who took 3 years and every border road in the realm to find his way to her door. She was worth every mile.